Hey, hello everyone. Well, my goodness me, it will be a short stream today, I promise. Yeah, well, you know what? I can't believe I wasn't able to stream last weekend for the Saudi Grand Prix. I did watch it though, but what with things such as let's get this camera thing out of the way. There we go. That might be a bit better. What with things such as Mother's Day here in the UK and whatnot, just wasn't able to spend some time streaming. So I did watch the race though. Did watch the Grand Prix. Um, Initial thoughts, underwhelming, perhaps. Be interesting to see what other people's views are on that. I thought last year's Grand Prix was more exciting, and perhaps that's because of there was a lot more in it. What with the battle between Verstappen and Hamilton sort of reaching its conclusion. But my initial thoughts were, excuse me, not the best Grand Prix I've seen. Time will tell on that whether or not that's yeah. But let's have a look at the quick. Let's have a look at the results. If we bring them up on the screen. So this is the actual result of the Grand Prix, the F1 Grand Prix, Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Max Verstappen winning the race, as we know. Charles Leclerc second, Carlos Sainz third. So it's number 2 and 3, and of course Sergio Perez completing the top 4, which seem to be miles off everyone at the moment. The top 4, or the top 4 drivers, the top 2 teams, Red Bull and Ferrari. Big gap back at the moment to George Russell. 10 seconds separate the top 4, and then another 22 seconds on top of that down to George Russell and Mercedes. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that Red Bull and Ferrari are the fastest. But who is the fastest? I still think Ferrari are the fastest. I know Verstappen went on to win the race, but I do feel that was more down to the fact that after the restart from the safety car, that Ferrari wasn't as comfortable at getting their tires up to temperature as quick as the Red Bulls were, and I think that played a part really. Other than that, the safety prior to the safety car, Leclerc was in total and utter control. So I think they'll be disappointed Ferrari that they didn't win it, but it's I guess it's a start. It's the start of the season. They're still filling each other out, but there's a lot more to come, obviously, in terms of the racing. Australia next. Quickly going to Australia. I'm not entirely sure what to expect there. Again, with these new rules and new regulations and the racing, Australia will provide a different challenge because Australia's a much tighter track. It's obviously a street circuit. It doesn't have big long straights. It will be a different type of challenge for the cars as opposed to Saudi, which was quite a long circuit as well. Other noticeable positions or places in Saudi Arabia. Lando Norris, McLaren's first point. Hey, McLaren have finally got points on the board. Very disappointing they were. Daniel Ricciardo obviously had to retire, and the other McLaren, Kevin Magnussen again in the Haas. Of course, Mick Schumacher didn't race after the incident in on Saturday in the qualifying. Not so much because he wasn't able to, but because of the damage sustained to that car, which was a write-off. And then the flyaway races to places like Australia has decided, actually, you know what? Let's not take the risk. We can't afford another car to go into the wall in that race. They wouldn't have the parts for Australia. So it made sense, I guess, to save the car, save the driver for another day and get to Australia. Kevin Magnussen still got a very respectable ninth, though, for the Haas team. Hamilton, for what it's worth, actually done okay, getting down to 10th in a very underwhelming Mercedes car. Very underwhelming Mercedes car. Now, just quickly I was going to quickly touch on that with the Mercedes car, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And the Mercedes engine, again, the Mercedes-powered engine cars struggling. And of course, as we know, the Saudi Arabia is quite a power-hungry circuit, good in straight lines and so on and so forth. The Mercedes struggle. Now, there were reports about whether or not after the first race, whether there was an issue with the Mercedes power engine, perhaps the new 10% biodegradable fuel. I've mentioned it myself as well. perhaps the engine isn't adapting to it as well as other cars. However, Mercedes have said themselves this week that after the Saudi Grand Prix, um, that there's nothing wrong there as such with the setting. Obviously, they can always do with more speed, but they're very much playing down the possibility of anything being wrong with the Mercedes engine. And in fact, it has been mentioned inside of F1 that the problem with the cars with the Mercedes powered engines are nothing to do with the engine, but just pure, simply aerodynamics and so on amongst Mercedes for porpoising, for example. McLaren hasn't got too much in the way of porpoising, but they're clearly lacking downforce, too much drag, and so on. So these Mercedes powered cars, all have individual aero problems. And the reason why they're the ones that are the slowest at the moment is because they've simply turned their engine modes down. There are reports that they've turned their engine modes down. No point running a Mercedes powered engine at a good pace or good power and use your engine life up when you've got a car that's not behaving the way you want it to behave. If that is true, I can understand that. I get it. But if it's true. Just a quick brief overview in terms of how why you would do that. Why would you not just, regardless of what your car, why you wouldn't just thrash your engine out anyway? And the reason why is quite simple. You are only allowed to use 3 engines throughout the entire season. Any engines you use additionally to the 3 that you're allowed to use, you incur grid penalties. And that could be quite costly, particularly later on in the year. So as a result, every car, you've got 22 races this year, something like that. You've got roughly to make your cars or your engines last 7 to 8 races on average, if you're going to make the full 3. Now, some cars some teams will, they'll get, within 3 or 4 races towards the end, and they'll say, you know what, we'll take a new engine, we'll take a grid place penalty, but it'll be worth it. We might have to suffer one race, but we're going to have a really good, strong engine for the next 3. And that's what Mercedes done last year. Mercedes, they got to the end, or got to the Brazilian Grand Prix. They decided, you know what, let's put a new engine in, take the grid penalty, take the pain for one race, but we're going to have a super quick engine because we could tune it up. Now, the other thing with the engines is they do have engine modes. You can turn the engines up, you can turn the engines down. But up until last year, I think it was the start of last year, Mercedes in particular had this setting which everyone craved called commonly known in the grid as party mode, where Mercedes, they got to that last stint in qualifying and then they put the engine up into full power, whacking a lap, be a second and a half quicker than everyone else, turn the engine down again and run a more suitable engine pace for the race the next day. However, to counter that, the FIA brought in regulations last year, which basically, in a nutshell, prevented teams from changing their engine mode during a qualifying and a race. So as a result, whatever you started your qualifying on a Saturday, whatever engine mode you was on, that was set. That engine mode was then set for the rest of the weekend. Didn't matter what you do in practice, but so that first time you take that car out onto the track on Saturday qualifying, whatever engine mode you're on, that engine mode has to stay in that same engine mode throughout the course of the race. As a result, Mercedes powered engines, or cars that use Mercedes powered engines, were obviously not cranking the power up, because if you take the power up, you've got to have it up all the time. And what does that do? Why not just run it on their full power all the time? Well, it wears your engine out. If you run it at higher mode, you get less life. You can run it at lower mode and get more life. Obviously, for what teams have been trying to do, particularly with Mercedes powered engines, is find that balance of where it's quick but also durable, because you don't want to be going more than 3 races. You can crank it up for a couple of races, but if you're trying to make that engine last 7 or 8 races, it's not going to if you're running it on too higher engine mode. So, bringing back to what we're just talking about in terms of the season with Mercedes powered cars, there are reports, and they're unconfirmed, but there are reports that Mercedes powered cars that are having issues with aeros, i.e. your McLarens, your Williams, and your Racing Points, there are reports they've got the engine mode on a lower setting so that when they get their car into a better state in terms of figuring out why they're perhaps struggling with aeros or porpoising or whatever the case might be, that they can just switch the engine up and have a few races later on with that engine on a higher engine mode to compensate. So there are, and it would make sense if that is the case, but I cannot confirm that's the case. We have to take it as it is, I guess, on face value. We'll see what happens in Australia. I think realistically, the best chance teams will start to figure more out with the cars when they start putting their upgrades on, which was normally speaking when cars start getting back or when the races start coming back towards Europe, for example, Barcelona, because it's cheaper for parts and so on and so forth. It's quite expensive to ship parts all the way to Australia. You can't do it quickly. Barcelona is normally the first race back in Europe, normally the time when cars will, they would have had 3 or 4 races to learn more about their car. Excuse me, they would have been able to develop the parts in wind tunnels and so on. There we go. And so by the time they get to Barcelona, they would be more confident that this part's going to work. So I don't expect too much to happen now. They might understand a bit more about the setup of the car, but I don't expect too much in the way of parts and so on. I don't expect anything in terms of major upgrades, certainly not upgrades anyway. Now, in terms of who is the quickest, you're getting Red Bull are adamant that Ferrari is still the quickest, but, and I agree, by the way, I do think Ferrari is still the quickest, but, and I will always say this, regardless of whatever team it is, never believe what a team tells you. It's very simple. They're managing expectations. Have you ever known a team turn around and say, "Oh yeah, we're the fastest"? Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I know we're the fastest. Yeah, but we're miles ahead of everyone else. No one's going to catch us ever. Have you ever heard it? No. Even when Mercedes were so far in front of everyone else, they never accepted. I say accepted. They never said, "Oh look, yeah, we're definitely the fastest." They would even then, without saying they weren't the fastest, they'd still downplay it. Well, yeah, but there are teams that are quite close at the moment, and we have to be on our guard because it could change very quickly. The Red Bulls are very quick, or the Ferraris are very quick, and so on. So it's always downplaying, and that's designed to manage expectations. So even Red Bull were the fastest, they're not going to say they're the fastest. They're going to say Ferrari the fastest. That's where that's where the pressure is, not on us. Don't worry about us. If we win the races, we've done bloody well. Ferrari lose the race, it's tragic for them. Managing expectations. All cars do it, all teams do it, all drivers do it. So don't take too much on what a Red Bull engineer might say about who's the quickest, or a Ferrari engineer say about who's the quickest. I would probably pay more attention to your neutrals, to people who aren't tied or emotionally attached to either team, for that reason, because it's managing expectations. Right. What was it? Something else I was going to look at. Right. So in terms of, that's what we're going to do. Let's have a look. So in terms of fastest laps, and this was interesting. So Charles Leclerc got the fastest lap, which means it's an extra point. So essentially, Charles Leclerc leads the championship for its worth after 2 races, purely because of the extra point that he's got for the fastest lap. Max Verstappen with the second fastest lap, 131.6, 131.7, not a lot in that. Little drop back to Carlos Sainz, 131.9, and then Sergio Perez is 132 flat. But then look at the gap, 7/10 of a second between 4th and 5th. But some positive news from McLaren is that it's a McLaren, the quickest at the best of the rest, 132.7. So, I'm not saying that means they're going to start, but it's at least they're starting to perhaps starting to unlock a little bit of pace there. Perhaps they've starting to get a bit more, or as the race went on, they may have learned more about the balance and so on. So it's very hard to say. Again, it's very early days, but yes, Nicholas Latifi 137 was his quickest lap, but he at the bottom end. No, he wasn't the bottom end, was he? Yeah, the bottom end, 18th. Yeah, what am I on about? Daniel Ricciardo off 34 laps, 134. Now you're seeing how I say it, that 137 to 131. It's a big gap, but that is on lap 48. On lap 48, 131. Your car's virtually empty on fuel at that point. It's a 50-lap race. Whereas this was on lap 9. Latifi obviously went on to put the car into a wall, hence the safety car. Yeah, and then you see that a lot of these fastest laps came in the 40s, because that's when the cars are lighter, haven't got a fuel load, and so on. Pit stop summary. Let's have a quick look for what it's worth. Daniel Ricciardo, I don't know what I mean. Lap 8, time of the day. Yeah, it's not a lot to learn on this, really. Yeah, starting grids. That was your starting grid. Sergio Perez up front there, finished 4th. Charles Leclerc second, finished 2nd. Not a lot changed there. Quite a few cars didn't finish though. 7 cars, I think, didn't finish all in all. This was qualifying. Sergio Perez tops 129. So you can see the difference, 129.9 to 131.6. Couple of seconds in it. That's because of obviously on a Saturday. It used to be, the gap used to be bigger, by the way, but because of the engine mode changing and not being able to crank the engine mode up for that last stint on qualifying. 128.2, in fact, in Q3 was the pole time. 128.2. That is what, 3 and a bit seconds quicker than the actual race fastest lap. Obviously, the race fastest lap, they still got fuel in the car. They've also got worn tires. They haven't got a brand shiny new set of tires at that point. They're worn tires on there. Some of them quite well worn out tires by that point. And breathe. So yeah, and there we have it. So it's I thought again, Australian Grand Prix or Saudi Grand Prix even was underwhelming. Not a great deal. There was a bit of a battle towards the end between Leclerc and Verstappen, but all in all, other than that, last year was better. I'll be honest. I'm expecting a better race in Australia because it's a tighter circuit. It's a slightly smaller circuit, so therefore it's more laps. Saudi Arabia is actually quite a long circuit, 131, 132, etc. They are long time. So, right. Anyway, till the next time, I told you it'd be a short stream. Till next time, I'll try and get again. It's I know I say it all the time, but I'm very busy at the moment with work and so on. But yeah, I'll try and keep you all updated as we go forward. I will do a live stream next weekend, early start because of Australia. And of course, I'll do a little video as well in terms of the new race for next season, Las Vegas, and how that's going to affect us in the UK and across Europe in terms of the timings, because of it's going to be a Saturday night race as opposed to a Sunday afternoon. But more for that when we come to that. Anyway, take care all, and I'll see you all again soon.